our agenda for today is an overview of the GTD method. I'm also going to do an overview of ClickUp as well, how to get and use the GTD template within ClickUp, how to make and use context, which is perhaps a slightly more advanced function, and then we'll go to questions. So by the end of that, we should have a pretty good coverage of the basics of both ClickUp and GTD, and then kind of enough to get you started. Okay, so this is the original workflow from Getting Things Done method, as suggested in the book. The basic idea of GTD is that it's a system to organize all the things that you need to do so that you don't have to remember them in your head. The point of it is to get to mental clarity so that you only have to focus on the one thing that you're doing right now, not trying to remember all the things you need to do in the future, because that tends to produce a lot of anxiety. Thinking about a lot of things in the future doesn't work particularly well with the human brain. So the idea here is that anything that needs to be done gets written down. Once it's written down, you're confident about it because you know it's in a system that's going to take care of it. So you have stuff, and this might be ideas, it might be things that people ask of you, jobs your boss assigns, whatever it is. Stuff is incoming, and it comes into your in basket. And the idea of this is just it's a collection place. You can quickly write something down. It takes you only the amount of time it takes you to write it down, and then you can keep going with what you're doing. And it's unprocessed. It's just a big pile of stuff, but it's there to remind you about it. And we'll talk about how to do that in ClickUp. Then once you get some time, you kind of process, what is this? What would it actually take to accomplish this task? Because oftentimes we write ourselves notes that are they're not very helpful. It's like, do this thing, or what would it take to get that done? What is the exact outcome we want? What is involved? And once we actually define that, then it's a real task. Then we actually know what it is and what needs to be done. And so then we can ask, is it actionable? And sometimes it's just not. It's just, no, this is not important, not relevant. Chuck it in the trash. We can get rid of this. Sometimes it's like, it's a good idea, but not right now. We can put it in our someday or maybe file. So this is kind of things that we'll review maybe once a week, once a month, once a quarter, depending on how you work. So we kind of know it's a good idea, and I'll look at it again in the future, but I don't need to focus on it right now. So this is kind of gives you the confidence that it's not being lost, but at the same time, it's not kind of getting in the way of your day or your week. Oftentimes we try and do too much stuff just because we're afraid we'll forget it. So this is a way of getting around that. Or it's just useful reference material. Maybe I'll need this information when I'm trying to do X, so I'll put it in a file, and then anytime that I am trying to do that thing, I can go and get it. So it's just helpful information that's available when needed, kind of like a personal library. If it is actionable, then the question is, what's the next action? What needs to be done first? And sometimes it'll be there'll be a lot of steps to getting it done, in which case we'll consider it a project. And we'll talk about how to do projects. They're kind of a little bit separate because they are a series of actions. If it's not a project, then we'll ask, will it take less than 2 minutes? So if it's a really quick action, it's just something you can do right now, then the suggestion is just do it. Get out of the way. Don't let it clutter your system. Don't let it clutter your mind. If it's less than 2 minutes, just get it out of the way. If it's longer than that, then we have a couple of options. So either you can delegate it, particularly if you are a manager or if you have other people who are helping you out, get it to the right person who should be doing it. And in that case, we'll put it in our waiting list because we do need to check that they have completed that thing. We don't just kind of want to forget about it and then run into problems down the road when we kind of find out that they haven't done it. The other option is to defer it, which just means put it in the future. There's two ways of putting it in the future. One is to calendar it for a very specific time. So maybe it's a meeting. This meeting needs to happen on Thursday at 2 p.m. And so we can put it in our calendar for then. Or if there's no specific time attached, it's just in our next actions. So I'll do it when I next have time. So that's the overall system. So the end result is that everything that I was worried about or thinking about that I needed to do is now out of my mind and in the system. I can go through my day, I can look at my next actions, look at what's coming up in the calendar, check that the things that I'm waiting for other people to do are getting done. And then when I need to refer to my projects and my kind of reference material and someday maybe lists. Cool. So no questions yet, but let's jump into ClickUp to look at how to get that done. So I've got a space here. Now I'll dive into the basics of how ClickUp works. So ClickUp is basically a place where you have tasks, and those tasks can be well organized. We have kind of multiple levels of organization so that you can keep things really separate and organized. The first and kind of top level of those is spaces. If you are on your own or in a small team or just getting started, I would suggest you have just one space. So I've created one here called Getting Things Done. Within that space, you can have lists of tasks, and you can even group those lists into folders. So for today, I'm actually going to use a template. So on the space level, I'm going to click on this plus button and go to templates. These are my personal templates that I've saved. I'm going to go to the ClickUp templates because this one we've created for you. I believe it's in project management, but I'm actually just going to search for it. And so we have the Getting Things Done template. We can see it here, got a little picture of it. And I'm going to click Use Template. This is going to import it. It's a folder with multiple lists within it. So now here I've got my Getting Things Done folder and my lists within that. Okay, so now that we've got that, the first thing in our kind of sequence, if we go back here to this one, is the in basket. So there's a couple of ways you can do the in basket in ClickUp. The recommended one is to use our home here. So home is this kind of like place that automatically aggregates all the things that you'd find useful. So we've got the inbox here, which is all your upcoming tasks that are assigned to you and have due dates that either needed to be started or are in the future with the next tab. And home has some kind of overview of stuff you've used recently, etc. We won't go too much into depth on that, but the key thing I wanted to point out here is the reminders function. So if we hit R on our keyboard, or we can create a reminder up here, we can just kind of jot down a note. So if something kind of suddenly comes to mind, you go, oh, I need to do this, I need to call Kathy, then we can just create a reminder there. And this is just kind of a quick way of jotting something down so that we do remember it. You can attach files, if you do know that you need to do that tomorrow, you can start putting some information on it. But the key thing here is just to jot it down. It's not to actually make a fully fledged to-do item. Once you've got that, and because I did put it as tomorrow, it's going to be under my next list here. So I'm tempted to say don't actually do that, like just leave it with no due date. So if we go call Kathy, they're always going to appear at the top here. Then once we, perhaps we're out walking on the town when we did this, and then once we have some time to sit down and process these items, we think, okay, well actually, it's not just calling Kathy, it's specifically calling Kathy to confirm the budget for X. That's where the actual task is. The end result is we want a confirmed budget for this thing. So I'm going to save that. And now what I want to do is now that it's a defined task, I want to put it in one of my lists. So we've got this little option here, add to list. And so these are some hidden spaces you didn't see before, but my getting things done one is here. And I'm going to get this done. So it's not scheduled. I don't have to call her at a specific time. I'm the one who's going to be doing it. So I'm going to put it in my next actions list. And you can see here, it's now turned into a task. I can open this task from here. I can also go back to my lists. I can see it's here, call Kathy. If I open this task, I've got a whole bunch of more information about it. If I do need to set a due date, priority, description. Description and attachments will probably be quite useful for the GTD system in that you can kind of clearly define what needs to be done and then just attach any documents that are relevant or related. Cool. So that's the first piece, the inbox. Kind of defining what it is going to be filling out the description, clarifying the name of the task. If it is not actionable, then we'll look at these three. So first of all, I can just delete that. It's no longer needed. If I do want to put it in my someday maybe list, then I've got this one down here. I've called it tickler file, which is another name for the same thing. And I'll jump into that in a minute. So I can just kind of either move it from here into my tickler file, or if I'm within the task, I can click Move Task up here and put it in my tickler file. The idea of a tickler file is it should tickle your interest every periodically. That's where that name comes from. Cool. Within my tickler file, I have two types of task. So this one is a someday maybe task with a due date, which means I'll get a notification for it. So it might be, oh, I'd like this to be brought back to my attention in, say, 2 months. I can set a due date, and then in 2 months, I'll get a notification to remind me about it. Or I can have one with no due date, and I'll just sit there, and maybe I'll periodically look through this list, and I'll that's the only time it'll be brought back to my attention is when I look through the list. So two different ways of kind of doing that. The other thing is perhaps this is reference material. In this case, it's definitely not, but perhaps this was actually kind of, a how-to guide on setting budgets. I could put that in my reference list down here. So my reference list just contains useful material and information. And you could do this as a list of tasks. You may also wish to do this simply as a doc view. And if I was doing it as a doc view, I might put it on the kind of like the folder here, and then just not have the list at all. So let's do that for a second. And you can see I've already got one doc here, which is actually a full in-depth guide to this whole template that will come with the template when you use it. So it'll be there for you. But I might create a second doc view here and call it reference with some bad spelling. And then you can start to add your pages for different categories. And within each page, you can add sub-pages. So, this is about item 1, and maybe item 1 has several sub-pages within that, etc., etc. And then you kind of, over here, you've got all of your text type description. You've got slash commands. So if you hit slash on your keyboard, it'll give you a few options that are extra, such as, putting in a table or doing dividers, things like that. Cool. So that's a different option for reference material if you don't like the list type format. The list type format is very good though for searching. So for example, if I search for the word future, that's going to bring up just the ones with future in the name. So it's more of like an itemized list type of thing, whereas the doc is just a pure text type document. Okay, so if it is actionable, then we go into what's the next action. So first, let's have a look. Actually, let's go first to these three down here. So waiting, calendar, and next actions. So if you are waiting for someone to do it, I have a waiting list here, and I'll review this every once in a while. If you are working in ClickUp with the person that you're waiting on it for, you can assign them to it so that they will see it. You may even wish to put it in their space or their folder, list, whatever they're working on, wherever their kind of personal area is. One thing that can be done is that you can have it in your waiting on list and then also add it to a second list, which is their personal list. So perhaps I'll put this in the demo personal tasks. So now it's in my list. So I'll see it as waiting on. It's also in their task list. So when they mark it as complete, it'll become complete in here. And in this case, I might actually like to see the complete ones. So I'll click this show close button here and then save that. So that any complete tasks will be visible. Otherwise, they'll just kind of disappear and they're not visible. Cool. Now, if we are scheduling on our calendar, I have a scheduled list here. And so all the tasks in here should have a start or due date. And what that'll allow me to do is to add a new view. So here is just a default list view. We do have lots of other types. And in particular, I'm interested in the calendar view. So I'm going to add that. And it will allow me to see my tasks on a calendar. Now you'll notice that these ones are a wee ways back in history. So let's put them as today and tomorrow. And then we'll see those here today and tomorrow. Now these are just all day tasks. We can also give them a time. And I can do that from here. You can also do that from list view as well. So we can add time and say this is 10 a.m. And now I haven't added a start date. If we go to this plus button here, you can see other columns that we could add to this view. We can show the start date. So maybe, finishes today at 10 p.m., but let's start it at, let's say 9 a.m. So 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. today. And I like to have this column on the left side of that, so that makes sense to me. Cool. Within the calendar view, if you don't like this kind of month view, you can zoom in to maybe just a day or, sorry, just a week, 4 days, or a single day. And that's also very helpful for scheduling things over time. So this one's still an all-day event, but I can just drag it down and say, actually, that's a 2 p.m. event. And it's jumped straight away to 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. Just as the default for 4 hours. So actually, I'm just going to shorten that down to, let's say it's an hour and a half event that's going to happen then. If you want to add a new event, you can just click on the calendar as well. So the calendar, very handy for scheduling. Okay, so that's our scheduled list. And then the very last one, the one we use the most, is next actions. And this is just a list of all the things that can be done at any time, just whenever you next have availability. Okay, so there's a couple of things that I might jump into here in terms of which action to do next. Because one of the points of the system is that you should always know what to do next and feel kind of comfortable and at peace about that you always know you're doing the right thing. So obviously, if you have something in your calendar for right now, that is the thing that you need to be doing because it's time specific. If you don't have something in your calendar, then we'll kind of parse the next actions for the stuff that needs to be done. Actually, let's jump into projects there. I did miss that. So how projects work in ClickUp is that each project will be its own list. So it's kind of separate from these. Now you could just add them as a new list. Go to the plus button here, create new list, and kind of name it. And you might give it a kind of a starting tag so you know it's a project and have it at the bottom here. Or what you could do is have a separate folder. So I've got my getting things done folder. I might create a, oops daisy, second folder for projects. And we can leave all this as is, that's fine. Cool, and in my projects thing, I can move my list into that. You do have to put it below the folder name there. I'll get rid of this list that it created for me. And so I've got project X. And now I might have all the different tasks in that project in there. So that way I can keep kind of well organized. Now, the project will have a number of tasks. Now, some people will prefer to just have these tasks in the project, and that's fine. However, some people will also like to have them in next actions. So there's a couple of ways you could do that. You could just straight up move them to the next actions list. And so you're kind of constantly, as tasks become doable, moving them into next actions. But you might like to keep them in projects as well, so you can kind of see them in both places. And once again, if we go into the task, we can go add to another list up here and add it to our next actions list. So now we can see task 1 is in project X. If we go to next actions, we can also see task 1 there. And it lets us know that this task is in multiple lists. There's a couple more advanced options that I won't go into today probably, but we do have an advanced webinar on GTD next week if you are interested in that. Cool, so that's pretty much it for projects. There is kind of a whole idea of having a list of projects. So as you create a new project, would have a new list for it. And you kind of see the list of projects here. Let's open this, rename that. And if you have them in a separate folder, you probably don't need this kind of starting tag. And then the first task of the project should always be plan the project. And that can be your first next item is to really put a plan around what this project is. So that's kind of what you're seeing over here with this project planning, project plans going around in a circle. I won't get too deep into that today. Most people kind of get it that a project has a plan and has a number of steps. So that's all good. Cool. Okay, let's jump back into next actions in terms of looking at how to know for sure that you're doing the right thing. So you could prioritize your next actions. You can drag to change the order here. But in particular, you want to match what you're doing to the amount of time available and the amount of energy you have. Now, we don't always have the same amount of energy throughout the day. Sometimes, you just feel very tired. You just kind of know that you're not going to be able to do a good job of maybe really creative type tasks. And sometimes you do have that energy and you kind of want to be working on those tasks. So what I'd suggest is creating a custom field. So I've actually got ones here already. So I've got one called effort, and this is just a star rating. So here we can see, all right, this is a pretty easy task that won't take too much effort, whereas maybe this one here, I'm going to need to be fresh, to get this task done and do a good job of it. I want to probably do it when I'm at really high energy. We can create a second one. So we've got all our different custom field types here. So I want to create one for the amount of time it's going to take. Actually, I won't create one. I might use an existing kind of built-in functionality, which is called time estimates. So in my space here, and this needs to be turned on. This is a ClickUp. So in my space here, I'll go to these three dots and go into this settings for this space. Within my settings here, I've got ClickUps. So these are features that can be turned on and off. So I have tags and priorities on, I have custom fields on, multiple assignees on. I also want time estimates. So review that, save those changes. And now I can add time estimate as a column here. So you can see these two tasks, I've actually entered this before I turned the ClickUp off. I'd estimated about 1 hour. And it's in the GTD system, it doesn't need to be accurate. It's not about tracking your time, or anything like that. It's really just about giving yourself an idea of about how long this is going to take. So since we've gone through the process of well defining what the task is, this should be reasonably possible. So here I might say this is a 30-minute task approximately, whereas this one's more of like I say 1 day. And I've got a setting to say that 1 day is 8 hours. So it's translated that to 8 hours for me. Cool. So maybe, right now I've got a meeting in an hour. I've only got an hour and I'm feeling pretty high energy. So probably, I can look at the ones that are 1 hour or less. And I'm thinking, okay, this one requires high energy. This is probably the best one to be doing right now. So that can be a good way of kind of prioritizing what you do when, and finding a task that matches what kind of effort and time you have available. Cool. Now, let's jump into contexts, which are, the basic idea of context is you can't always do all tasks. Maybe call Kathy, maybe I need to do that from the office phone. So I can't do it while I'm at home, I can't do it while I'm at the shops. I need to be in the office for that to happen. Whereas other tasks might be personal, they need to be done at home. Maybe I've got questions for the accountant, they can really only happen, when I'm next talking to him. So we have to it's helpful to divide tasks between those so we can look immediately at what can I get done where I am right now. And contexts don't have to just be a place. They could also be a time. It could also be who you're with. So it could be they need to be done at night. They need to be done with the accountant, etc. So I've created a custom field, and this is a label custom field called context. If we go into the settings of this one, we've see I've given it the name context, and I've just added a few options. So maybe something as a call, so it needs to be at a time when calls are possible. I've got with the accountant, I've got work at home, and I've got other. And I've given them each a color, so they look pretty. I can always add a new option if needed. So here, this task can be done with the accountant. This one's a call. Let's say this one needs to be done at work, and this one needs to be done at home. Okay, so we've got these contexts, and I've got this custom field on the whole folder, which means if I go to a list view here, I can see it across all my spaces, all my lists. So when I'm looking at the folder view, I can see all the lists within that folder displayed. So here I've got next actions, I've got scheduled, I've got waiting on or delegated, project list. Yeah, so our project list, I didn't touch on that actually. So this is just the list of the projects we put in here. This is kind of optional. I tend to go without it, although if your projects are quite small, where you can fit a whole project in the subtasks here. So subtasks are basically like a regular task, except they sit below a task. So if you do prefer that kind of small project type option, that is an option here. So yeah, either one of these approaches works, depends what suits you best. Okay, so back to what we're saying. Yeah, seeing all of our lists in this folder, we can see that they've all got contexts. So now what I can do is I can put a filter on to filter for just a certain context. So my little filter icon up here, I'll scroll to the bottom where my custom fields are. I'll click on context and say the context is, and then pick one. Just calls. And now I can only see the tasks with calls. with the call context. Now I could save that, so I could quickly come back to it. But what I've actually done, which is easy, is I've created a number of new views, put a filter on each, and then saved them. So this one is actually all, where I can see everything. I've got my home context. Then I've got my work context, my with the accountant context, and my calls context. Actually, my work context there, let's just display that custom field. Okay, it's just got a lot. You've got a lot of tasks there. And we can also group these. So you see how they're quite separated right now? Probably we would keep the grouping because, scheduled and waiting and delegate and waiting on are quite different things. Actually, we might only want to see next tasks. So we could say, within the getting things done folder, let's filter for the location is only next actions. That might be quite useful. Maybe next actions and scheduled, just in case we have something scheduled. So that could be useful. But if we did have kind of quite a few in there, you can also group them by different things. So here we're grouping by status within list. You could also group by, say, priority, if you're using priority. Here I'm not. Or you could group by custom field by, say, effort. Might be useful as well. But typically for GTD, I leave things just grouped by status. Cool. Okay, one more thing with contexts is I tend to jump between them fairly. I want to get there quickly. I don't want to mess around getting to something. So what I'll do, you could pin them so they're kind of at the top here, kind of out of this drop down. But that's not actually what I do. What I do is I favorite them. So if I go to my home view here, go to these three dots, I'll go add to favorites. I can call it whatever I want. I might just leave it as home. And then within my favorites, you'll see home here. If I'm anywhere in ClickUp, I can click on that to jump straight to it. What I also like to do is to click on this pin icon up here, which displays them kind of across the top of my screen here. So they're always easy to get to. So I can just click immediately on that one button, and I can get there. So I'd have kind of like home, work, whatever else I commonly use. So I can quickly jump between contexts. Cool. So in order to create a new context in ClickUp, all we'll do is we'll go into our Getting Things Done folder, show our context custom field, and then go, you need to go edit here, or if you click on a value, I think, no, that's not, we changed it. So yeah, click on the header and go into edit field up here. And just go add new option. Let's say we have, at the shops. For all those things you need to remember to get when you're next to the shops. Let's make that teal. Save that. And then all we need to do is create a new view. I'll use a list view. And I'll give it a name here. Call it shops. Add the filter. So we'll go to our context is shops. And then save that. And now when I mark tasks as shops, they'll appear here. Awesome. That is the basics of the Getting Things Done method within ClickUp. I think I've hit it all there. Just going to check. Yeah. So let's start jumping into some questions, and we'll see what else has come up and if there's anything else that I can help explain here. Okay, so taking the questions from the top. What's the best way to work with projects and next actions in ClickUp? I've been experimenting with linking tasks, but it can be cumbersome. Hopefully I've just gone over that. Yeah, in terms of moving your kind of like first next action from a project into next actions, you can drag it there. You can add it to multiple lists like this. A couple of more advanced options is that you can go to the level that contains both of these. So this is, this project is within the folder, next action is within a folder. The space is across both of them. So we could go to the space level and then filter for next actions. So yeah, so this is kind of more advanced, but one thing I do is I often have a, say like a drop down of type, and one of those types is next actions. And then all you have to do is mark your next thing as next actions. And then I have a next actions view at the higher level. And if you're putting your project lists within this folder, this can simply be at the folder level. It just has to be above everything that you want to show up. And then I'll filter for either the location is next actions, or and we do need to add that custom field at this level. So we'll go into, instead of creating a new custom field, we'll add an existing one. And I'll use that drop down that I just created. And I've done a bad thing and made multiple that are the same name. Trying to avoid doing that. Cool, so I've got that custom field there. So now I can filter on it. So type is next action. And so that will pull in everything in the next actions list, and also anything from your projects with that next action tag. If you prefer not to manually tag these, you could just make each thing dependent on the next one. And then instead of using the filter for type is next action, you could do dependency has waiting on. No, blocking. Blocking would be the first one. Yeah. So that's a bit more advanced. If that didn't make sense to you, don't worry. But those are a couple of ways of doing a more automatic project into next action system. Cool. Can you link dependencies between tasks? How many dependencies can you add? Okay. Well, that's very much in the same line. Yes, you can add dependencies between tasks. You can add as many as you want. So in a task here, I'll go into dependencies, and I'll say this one is blocking, which means it needs to go first. And the task that needs to go after it is, where are we? We're in project X, is task 2. So now it's blocking task 2. Task 2 is waiting on task 1. If you do use Gantt charts, they're a very quick way of setting up dependencies. So that's just another view here. So if we find our tasks, we haven't actually scheduled them. So we do need to schedule them to see on a Gantt chart. So maybe this is not that useful actually, if you have unscheduled tasks. But if you do have scheduled ones, you can drag and drop them onto the Gantt chart. And you can see there's automatically that dependency there. I can delete that and I can add new ones. So you can kind of quickly add dependencies to a lot of tasks if needed. Cool. Is that initial flowchart created in ClickUp, or is it an external software? Do you mean this one? If so, no, this is actually from the book. So I have no idea what software you used to create it. It's quite old. If you are making flowcharts in ClickUp, that would be our mind map view, but it will look different to that one. Yeah. Okay, you see that is now a task. What is it that made that look like a task? Okay, yep. What are the visual clues of what the items in these lists are? Okay, yep, good question. Yeah, so you don't have to think about that too much within ClickUp because almost everything is a task. We don't really have lots of different item types. We have tasks. The only thing that's different is those reminders. So you can create a reminder by hitting R on your keyboard, and you can see them in your inbox. So this one used to be a reminder and turned into a task. So let's create a new reminder here. So this is the input box for creating a reminder, same as if you hit R. You can see the reminder, it has this little like hand icon with a little string tied around it. And they can only exist here. They can't be in your hierarchy. So everything in your hierarchy is a task. And I turned it into a task by adding it to a list. This little button here. Cool. Okay, can you please demonstrate search in getting things done? Okay, so one option is just to use the general search, and that's useful. I used the hotkey S there. That's useful if you know the name of the task. So for example, I know a task had the word future in it. And so I've got quite a few options there. So what I could do is I might want to just put it down to, because it's searching all my spaces, I actually just want to look in the getting things done one. And maybe we'll include both projects and getting things done. Now I'm not finding a task there. Did I perhaps change the name of it? Okay, so let's try one that actually I know for sure. So we've got Kathy. So we'll go Kathy and search just in getting things done. And so we've got Kathy there. What I'm thinking you might be talking about more though is just using this search here. So this is kind of within this list only, whereas that search is everywhere. And you can see it kind of was pulling up results that I wasn't as interested in. So what I would suggest is going to the level that contains everything, everywhere you might want to search. So if you're just looking in next actions, you can do it here. But if you want to look in all your lists, I'd do it at the folder level, and I'd take off a filter. So the filter's stopping us from seeing everything. It's filtering what tasks are coming in. So if I look there, it's going to pull it up. Or it might be you want to look across this folder and your projects folder, and you can do the exact same thing up here, again without filters, and quickly find a task that way. So that's kind of the general options for searching. Hopefully that answers that question. Okay, if a staff member has a task that is blocking another task assigned to team member 2, can team member 1 mark it as complete even if it isn't? And can team member 2 bump the task back to them? Team member 1 can definitely mark a task complete even if it isn't, although I'm not sure that's a great idea. And can team member 2 bump the task back to them? I don't really know exactly what that means. If team member 2 sees that the task is done and it shouldn't be, they can mark it as incomplete. So for example, if we go into this, mark it as complete, they can then go back and mark it as incomplete. However, team member 2 can also get started on their task without having to wait for the first task to be done. So ClickUp doesn't force you to not be able to work on a task just because it's waiting on something else. So in terms of how you have them communicate with each other and what needs to get done, that'll probably be more like a management practice or communicating on it. What I'd suggest is you'd say, hey, Willow, I want to get started on this task, but your task is blocking it. Is it okay if I get started? And then Willow can then reply and say, yeah, that should be fine. And then they can get started. So it's just about communicating with each other. Should be fine. Yeah, so in terms of using it correctly, ClickUp can be used in lots of different ways. You're not going to break the system, I guess, by using it in different ways. What I would suggest is pick a way that suits your team, because different teams have different cultures. So you can either allow them to work on tasks that are being blocked or not, and if so, how they should go about communicating that. A lot of people like to have, at the, say, everything level, a doc view with all their standard operating procedures of just, how they like to go about things like that. So everyone's on the same page. Can you have both doc lists and docs in reference? Yes, definitely. So if we go into the reference list here, these are our tasks. I'm assuming that's what you meant by lists. And then we can add a doc view here as well and call that reference. So we can jump into our list to see our tasks, jump into our reference doc to see all of our kind of text-based reference material. Also, if you do have text-based stuff, you can add it in the description in here. So you can definitely have the same things in here. And you can also attach a whole doc to a task or create a new one in case that's helpful. For a graphic design agency with lots of clients, do you recommend creating a new project with all the design requests under the project? Okay, we've got a webinar on that actually, a separate webinar. Generally for design, what I'd suggest is a space. Each folder is a client, and then their projects within that folder as lists. assuming that clients tend to have more than one project each. And so yes, you'd start off probably with their requests in each list. Yep. And if you'd like more information on that, there is a webinar on that. Okay, I actually have a list of projects and each one has tasks and its tasks as subtasks. Any advantages of one model versus another? Okay, so this is kind of like the question of, should you have a project as a list here with the tasks, or should you have a project as tasks with subtasks? The key difference is that if you have a list with tasks in it, then these tasks can have their own subtasks. So basically, the bigger the thing is, the higher up in the hierarchy you want it. So like this could be a really large project. It could have 100 tasks, and each of those 100 tasks could have 5 subtasks. So it could be really big. Whereas a single task, I'd only want it to have kind of maximum 20 subtasks. So it's going to be a little bit smaller. The other thing is just how it's organized. Obviously, this is very nicely organized in that it's within my getting things done folder. So I typically tend to go, the smallest, do it in the smallest way that's big enough to match the projects. So if your projects can fit within a single task with subtasks, I'd suggest doing that. It's going to make them easy to look for. You can have custom fields on tasks. You can't currently have custom fields on lists. So I can't to add information about this project. I can add a task description. Sorry, not a task description, a list description and some list information, but I can't have custom fields. Whereas on my projects here, I can add custom fields that apply to these tasks, where here a task is a project. So go as high up in the hierarchy as you need to fit the project in, but don't go any higher than you need, if that makes sense. Okay, is there a way to add a blocking status like billing that only select users can switch to complete? No. So what you can do is if you go into the permissions of an item, so you can do this on a task or a whole list, and go sharing and permissions, and we've got 10 people added to this list. I can change someone to only can comment, which means that they can work on the task and they can add comments. And if it's assigned to them, they can change the status. They can change it to anything, but you generally expect them to only change it to the next status. But we don't have certain, blocked statuses or things like that just yet. Yeah, there might be a neat way of doing that, but it would take me a bit longer to think it through. Okay, how can you enforce a workflow WRT statuses? I don't actually know what WRT statuses are off the top of my head. Maybe you can add another comment to that question and we'll come back to it. Okay, very basic question. What is the best way to mark a task as done? What does closed mean? Okay, yep. So in each list, we can have different statuses. We can go edit our statuses here. So we see this one has open, in progress, review, and closed. So the easiest way to mark something as done is to click on it, the little box here, or within the task, you've got the status up here, and just choose a new status. So if you choose the final one, then it's closed, and it's saying, hey, you've got subtasks that aren't finished. We'll continue without doing anything with those. Now, you did mention done. So if we go back into edit list statuses here, we do have these done statuses. Done statuses are the same as closed statuses. The only real difference is they don't automatically disappear. They'll kind of stay within view. But generally, you might use done statuses for when something, so like the sales idea is easier. If you have a lead that's not sold, but instead was lost, they actually decided they didn't want to buy, I'd put it in a done status called lost. So it's different for reporting from my closed status, but it's still marked as complete. There's no more work to be done on it. Cool, hopefully that answers that question. Can you avoid creating the sense that you're getting stuff done, but really just playing around with ClickUp? Yeah, good question. Yes, the way that I generally suggest for that is make it as simple as possible. there are a lot of features in ClickUp. The features are there for when you need them. Don't try and use them all, particularly not at the start. You'll end up just super, overwhelming yourself and spending lots of time trying to do stuff that you don't really need. So typically I would suggest people start with one space and then just one list. Well, I mean, if you're on your own, maybe that. If you're at a company, you might have a really obvious delineation between a couple of different teams, and you can start off with a couple of lists or maybe a couple of folders. But you can probably fit within one space. And then when you start getting too much stuff in any one list or any one folder, then you kind of make a new folder, like start separating it out, so that you end up with a hierarchy that's no bigger than you need it. So same thing as kind of we're talking about before. Use as much space as you need, but no more, so that things aren't too spread out. And use features that you need, but no more. So if you're like feeling a pain point, you're like, oh, I wish we had this, then Google it, look through our help docs, see if we have it. Good chance we do, and then turn it on. But I would suggest avoiding turning on a bunch of features just to play with them. I mean, if you're enjoying that, then go ahead and do it. I do that a lot. But in terms of getting things done, it's better to stick with simple. Yeah, hopefully that answers that question. Okay, can subtasks be, whoops, I lost that question. Okay, here we go. Can subtasks be converted to tasks? Can tasks be converted to projects? Yes. So here I'll create a subtask under this task. And so if we go into the subtask, we've got a 3 dot menu button here, and we can convert it to a task. Or in the list view, if we are showing tasks, let's show them as expanded. Interesting, not playing ball. Okay. Okay, so we've got project 2 here, subtask. We can also go to the 3 dot menu here and convert it to a task. So that's now a full-fledged task. You can see that the subtask icon here has gone away. And if we have this project here, we can actually convert this to a list. Assuming I remember how to do that. Yeah, so it's actually only in this 3 dot menu within the task itself, because you typically only want to be doing this kind of one at a time, fairly slowly. So convert to list, cannot be undone, great, convert to list, and now I've got project 2 there. And it pulls through some of the information from that as well. If I had left that subtask on it, it probably actually would have populated a task there. So yeah, that's how to do that. Okay, we get stuff in our inbox from different sources. How about sending tasks to next actions from Outlook or using ClickUp Chrome extension? Yes, those are both options. In those, you'll be able to select the list and you just select your next actions list. You can also, if you go into settings here and this little mail icon, you can email things directly to this list, say from your email provider. And you can, if you put information here in these little brackets, you can actually add a due date, assign it to someone, and add tags as well, just so you're aware of that. So that's in the 3 dots beside a list and the email instructions. Okay, can views go across spaces such that you could have a work GTD space and a home GTD space? Yes, so you can have views on your spaces. You can also have views at the everything level, which will include all the tasks in all spaces. How did you nest each of the various views on your next action to show various contexts? Okay, yep. That actually happens automatically now. So we've made a change. So I think I had it here. So you see how they're all kind of all the views are in a drop-down. This should happen automatically. If it doesn't, you do need to have more than one view of the same type. So if I created a board view, or yeah, let's go board view, it would not. It's kind of separate. So the board view type will have its own drop-down. If that's not happening, contact the support team. It probably means there's so little things that can make that happen. But anyway, if it's not happening, contact the support team. Okay, I'm going to jump around a little bit here. Okay, I have different spaces, like one for work and one for personal stuff. How can I apply the GTD method over different spaces? So the GTD method is innately a personal system. You can use it for teams, but that's quite a different application. So I'm kind of guessing here you mean to use it personally, but you want to use it for stuff in multiple spaces. I'd suggest putting the folder in your personal space and then adding things from your workspace to it using the tasks in multiple lists. So you leave it in your workspace, but then add it to your GTD list as an extra list. WRT equals with respect to. Okay, let's see if we can find that question again. How do you enforce a workflow with respect to its statuses? Enforce. So by enforce, I assume you mean make sure employees do it. ClickUp is fairly a friendly kind of open software. We don't have too much kind of heavy, some of the older softwares are like super restricted and they've, literally force people to do things in a certain way. ClickUp has less of those features. There's currently no feature to force people to step through statuses in a certain order. So for example, we often, if something is done quickly, we'll jump to complete. We'll often jump backwards to review status or jump backwards from your review to changes needed. So there's currently not a way that I can think of right now to force people to go through statuses in a certain order. Generally, we'd use training and SOPs to kind of say this is the expectations. And you can see the history in a task to see, what's happened in terms of its statuses. If you do want to check on, whether anyone's been following the SOPs. So you'll have these action items here or activity items. Could context potentially be used to replace a space? For example, let's say I'm studying for 3 certifications that I want to get over the next 3 months. My initial thought would be have space for each individual certification. Yeah, so it's very possible to have more lists in one space, or sorry, one space or even one list, and then just have multiple views. If you have good tagging or good ways of doing separators, and by the way, labels or tags, you can use both of them. There's no huge difference. They just kind of look different. Yeah, you could have more stuff in one space and then just good separators and then multiple views. It's really just a personal preference. Generally, at some point, people like having a totally different space, like totally different location, whether that be list, folder, or space, just because it feels separate to them and that feels nice. But both work just fine. Okay, actually, we'll got 5 more minutes. Let's just take a few more questions, and then we'll have to wrap up the day. If you didn't get your questions answered, that you can always go to the Help Center here and find a whole lot of support, and you can connect with our team as well. Will we be seeing mind map view today? No, this doesn't come too much into the GTD method, but do feel free to play around with it yourself. How does homepage factor in with this next actions paradigm? Okay, so home view has a few options here. So your inbox is anything that's scheduled. So if it does have a due date, that'll make sense. If it doesn't, then it's not going to appear there. It's going to appear in unscheduled, which is why I tend to use the next actions list. The home tab of this will show you your agenda for the day, which is good for the calendar stuff. Trending tasks in our kind of tasks section will show you tasks that you've most looked at recently. So it's more about getting back to stuff quickly, same with lists, etc. What could be useful is your lineup. So this is kind of an idea of picking out a few tasks that you want to get done today. So it could be the first few actions on your next actions list. But overall, it probably works best to just do that, to just use that as a place for that kind of inbox of reminders. So you can quickly jot something down and then use the list for next actions. Would be the way that I tend to do it. Okay, can a list and its corresponding task and subtask be created into a document? No. No, you could copy and paste information from it to a doc, but that sounds kind of annoying. Yeah, I'm not currently aware of a function that would kind of match what you're looking for there. When will you have a Spanish version? I'm not sure, but we are looking more and more now at usability type requests. Is it common to assign supervisors as watchers to all tasks assigned to staff? How often are notifications sent to management? Notifications, we don't have a specific management function, but if you do want to add yourself as a watcher, you will get the updates that you select. You can select, so you'll automatically become a watcher if you're assigned to the task or mentioned on it. You can also add yourself as a watcher. You can do that in bulk by selecting multiple tasks and adding watchers. You can select what things you get notified about in your notification settings. So that's an option. Is it common? I'm not really sure. I think definitely a lot of people would do that, not everyone. And then they'll get notifications based on when actions happen that match their notification settings. It's probably the best I can answer that question. Okay. When I'm on the web and I see a page I want to bookmark, can I bookmark it as a task to a space I have hidden in ClickUp? That is a very good question. So the bookmarking function is part of the Chrome extension. Whether or not you can use a space that is hidden, I'm uncertain. Yeah, I can't actually bring up the other Chrome extension. This is the development one. But if you're able to select it there, then the answer is yes. If not, then probably not. I think it's very likely that you would be able to. Can we somehow drag tasks from a specific context to the calendar? Good question. Okay, so let's go into our calendar here. So what you're basically looking for is to filter this sidebar. And no, that's not currently possible. So you'd be looking to filter your unscheduled tasks. It is something we're looking at in the future. We're wanting to upgrade the sidebar, but not just yet. What you could do though, actually, no, sorry, I lied. There's a really easy way of doing that. So you can't filter within the sidebar. You can just filter the whole view, which will affect the sidebar. So you could just go context is, let's do this on a list where I can actually see something. So let's go up to here. So there's lots of unscheduled stuff here because a lot of it's not supposed to be scheduled. Cool. And then we can filter just to where the, now I do need my context at this level. I've actually only got my context at the folder level. So let's do that instead. I could add it to the space level, but it would take a few seconds. So I'll skip that. So context is, let's say, work. And we'll see it's gone down to just the work ones. So yeah, that's a really easy way of doing that. So in your case, you'd filter to calls. You'd see all your calls here and you start dropping them onto the calendar. Okay, I think that's all the time we have for today. But thank you very much for attending our webinar. I hope that's been really helpful for you. If you are looking for to get more advanced questions answered, we will be doing another webinar on getting things done next week. And that will be a more advanced one. So we'll kind of skip the basics of at least ClickUp and maybe some of the basics of what GTD is and get a bit more into the advanced use cases. Awesome. Have a great day and I'll see you next time.